right hand to touch the smooth rail. She smiled again, small and surprised this time. "Good work," she said. "It'll hold," he said. "I can tell." When Eli blew out the lamp and stepped toward the couch, he heard Sage's breath catch. Like a person who had learned not to make a sound in the dark and forgot for a moment, he paused in the doorway and listened. "Who did you lose?" she asked the darkness. "My wife," he said. The word was simple and old, and it still knocked the wind out of him. Fever took Mary. 5 years back, Sage was silent. But then her voice reached through the night. "My mother," she said, "and my brother, and my hand. The snow you saw before took fingers. Another storm took other things." She took a shallow breath. "Sleep, Eli Mercer. I'll be on your floor at dawn, stacking wood." Emil said she didn't have to, that she could rest, that he had enough wood stacked. Then he kept his mouth shut, because a person deserved to keep the things that made them belong. He lay on the couch. The storm battered the eaves and rattled the shutters. One log in the stove settled with a thunk. Rufus snored. Eli closed his eyes. He woke in darkness before the gray hour, not to the wind or the stove, but to a sound that took him years. Baka, name breathed like a prayer and a warning together. "Soma," Sage whispered. Eli lay still. The name sank through him like ice, because he had heard it once in a different winter, from a different mouth. On a field of snow not so many miles from his own front door, the storm did not end, but it thinned. Morning came the way it does. On the northern prairie, without much light at first, just a slow easing of deep blue into pale. Eli got the coffee on. He heard the soft scrape of wood on wood and looked up to see Sage in the doorway, hair braided and pinned, empty sleeve. Tied back, she had wrapped the quilt around her shoulders in the fashion of a shawl. She had already been out to the porch, he saw. Snow clung to the hem of the blanket and melted in dark drops onto his floor. "You're not made of sugar," Eli said, "but you'll still fall apart if you keep standing in wet snow." "Only a little wet," she said, and went straight to the wood box, knelt, and began stacking his split logs into neat, tight rows, as if they were soldiers standing at attention. Eli watched her do it, not just because it was his kind of work done with such care, but because she did it in silence, with an economy of motion that comes only with practice. When she had made the wood stand well, she wiped her hand on her skirt and went to the table. Eli set a plate in front of her, half a loaf of sour bread and slices of salt pork. In a jar of preserves he broke out of habit only on Sundays in company. He did not know what Sage would take and did not want to guess. Wrong. She took a small piece of bread, a sliver of meat, and a spoonful of preserves as if she was crowning something ordinary. "What's the name you spoke last night?" Eli asked, after they ate and there was the friendly clank of dishes in a tin sink and the sound of the storm easing further. He had not meant to ask. It was a name from his memory, like a shard of blue glass. Sage's eyes lifted. They were darker in daylight, the color of river stones after rain. "You heard?" she said. "It woke me," he said. She looked toward the window, the curtain twitching with the wind. "Soma was my brother," she said. "He laughed like birds and ran like water. He wore a red scarf my mother made. I saw that red in a field of snow, but he was too far, and there were men behind. Me and I could not reach him. I was told he was taken to a school far from our river. Maybe they were right. Maybe the snow took him from me before the men did. I dream him either way." She dipped her head as if she had listened to the words right out of her body. Eli set the coffee pot down. He had been a boy with too little sense and too much fear when the army paid cash money for men who knew the land. He had broken horses and broken his mother's heart and signed papers that kept his hands shaking long after the ink dried. He had ridden far enough east to cross a stretch of white plains where winter bit bone. He had drawn a map for men who carried bayonets on their rifles and were cold enough to think fire on a village made sense. He had helped wedge logs on a river to keep a bridge from washing away, and had heard a woman cry out a name as red cloth fluttered in the trees. "Where would a school like that be?" Eli asked, voice steady with something that was not quite. "Calm somewhere with sticks and smoke," Sage said, with the rough shrug of a person borderless. A big house where they cut hair, where some women are kind and some men are not. She pressed her lips together. I sleep in places like your floor to find my brother in the night. I work in the morning to repay the roof. Then I move on. Oh, you. Make a habit of this, Eli said. He did not know why he used a light word. He wanted to use a different one, like blood or oath or debt. But this was her story, and she had kept it light to keep it from crushing her. I am not a ghost, she said, and that small smile came back the quicker one. I don't haunt. I just pass through, but not without leaving something behind. Feels polite. You left my wood better than it was, he said. My father would like you. Mary would too. Sage's eyes softened. She did not ask about Mary in the way people in town would have, staring and prying. She simply let the name hang in the room like another quilt against the cold. Thank you, she said. A shadow passed the window then. Eli stepped to the door and eased it open. The wind brought a taste of wood smoke and wet rust. A man on a roan mare lifted his gloved hand in the kind of salute that meant trouble was only visiting because the weather permitted. Von Pike smiled up from the saddle, with as much warmth as snow. Morning, Mercer, he said, voice high with a cheer he had not earned. Bad turnout here. I hope you're keeping warm. We are, Eli said, patient. Pike's eyes flicked past Eli's shoulder. He saw Sage standing by the stove. His smile tightened. You got company, he said, like a person announcing a disease. I have a guest, Eli said. Pike spread his hands as if appealing to God. Agency law says runaways go back. You take in one, you'll find yourself lighter. A few head of cattle right quick. I'd hate for you to make a foolish mistake that hurts your herd. Rufus pushed between Eli's legs and put his forepaws on the threshold, not growling, but present. Eli planted his boots. You'll catch your death in this cold, Vaughn, he said. Warm yourself at your own stove. There's a storm. There'll be no agency men crossing the river today. Pike's mouth did something that might have been called a smile if you had never seen a sunrise. You've always liked thinking for yourself, Mercer, he said. That's how men like you find yourself thinking for me sooner or later. He nodded at Sage. She cost you a fine bed once it gets around, if not more. Eli shut the door with more calm than he had. He turned and found Sage watching him with that clear look that made a man feel looked at, not through. She tilted her head. He wants what is not his, she said softly. He always has, Eli said. He felt the map in his pocket he no longer drew the roads that led to a longer war than any with guns. One of fences and water rights and gossip and law. The wind pushed on the house again. The new log settled and threw a burst of sparks behind the stove door. Sage drew her shawl closer. If I tie my hair and do your laundry, the town will let me walk through if I keep my eyes down, she said. I can watch men talk. Done that too. You don't need to do my laundry, Eli said, and found himself smiling because he had never liked anyone doing that for him. But if you're set on staying a day or two, I won't argue. She nodded once. I'll stay, she said. The storm says I should. That man says I should leave. I trust the storm more. The kettle began to sing again on the stove. Eli poured himself another cup of coffee he did not need, because the warmth of it gave his hands something to hold. He wanted to tell Sage what Pike's stare had meant what. Danger could come in a polite voice from a powerful rancher who thought the river belonged to him. He wanted to tell her he had been a boy when he last heard that name she had spoken in the night, and how it had grown up into an old fear. But the wind knocked on the window then, and the day already had more than it needed. Let me show you. The shop, he said instead. You said you could handle wood. I've got a barn door that likes to argue when I tell it to close. Might be we can make it understand plain speech. Sage's mouth made that small shape again, half smile, half breath of relief. I'd like to see your tools, she said. There was not a hint of humor in it. I'll make the door speak your words. The shop smelled like cedar and linseed oil and the blue smoke that wrapped around men working in cold sheds. Eli had built a bench with peg holes along one edge. A vice that had belonged to his father, another vice he had stolen hours from sleep to make with his own hands. There were planes and saws hung perfectly spaced on the wall. A bow saw with its cord fixed just so. A collection of chisels with handles turned, so many times that the wood shone like a polished river stone. Sage stood in the doorway a moment and breathed. The wind sang through the crack in the eaves like a high violin. She reached with her right hand and touched the handle of the nearest plane the way she had touched the bed rail. She could hear its history through her skin. "Who taught you?" Eli asked. "Careful." "My father," she said, as if the question was not dangerous. "He said a man who could make a strong joint could keep a home together before he had a wife to help. He made bow racks and cradle boards. And once, a wheel for a man whose cart had gone down in the river. When I lost this," she lifted the end of her left sleeve. "My father cut handles thinner and wrapped them in leather so I could grip, said we would only lose as much. As we surrendered, we did not surrender wood." Eli watched her lift a plane, set a block of pine in the vise, and pull the blade through with short, controlled strokes. A curl rose from the cut like a ribbon and fell to the floor with a whisper. She leaned into the work with a balance he had not seen, using her waist and shoulder, guiding with her wrist and the inside of her forearm against the wood, making her body do the thing her hand had done once. The sound changed as the wood trued. Tile shut his eyes and listened. It was a sound he associated with mornings, when the house had been warmer and laughter lived in it. "You got touch," he said. Sage lifted her head and let the curl fall. "You." "Say that like a surprise," she said lightly. But there was something under the words, like something else could be asked. "Not a surprise," he said. "A memory? A good one?" she asked. There was danger in that question too, because a bad memory can be good if it gives you something to hold. "It sounds like peace," he said. They planed the door together then, and fixed the hinge, and shifted the latch plate so the bolt slid home with a louder, kinder click. Eli held the door, and Sage set the screws with her body bent just so, getting the pressure right with her palm and her breath. When they stepped back, the door sat, flush, as if it had never been otherwise. "You see," Sage said, mock stern. "I can handle wood, sir." "You can," he said, and the sir made her eyes shine a little with humor, as if now it was a thing they shared, not a thing she had said to keep from falling. They stood a moment in that close warmth, a space made of work and shared breath, and then the world entered again. Bootsteps on hard ground came slow toward the shop. Eli touched Sage's shoulder and she slipped instinctively behind the stack of planks, not hiding like a hunted thing, but like a person who had learned not to be where another person expected to see them. Caleb Boone ducked under the shops, low lintel with his hat in his hand and a face full of a man who had done work he did not want to do. "Eli," he said, "you got folks looking for you in town?" Bond Pike's at the livery with the deputy and Agent Tillman from the agency. "Says there's a runaway woman up your way. Says he's got men to ride now that the snow's lifted a touch." He glanced toward the planks, caught the movement, and his mouth flattened. Caleb and Eli had worn the same dust and blood 10 years back, had built the same fences, had stood with their backs to each other in a brawl outside the feed store once, because a man had said the wrong thing about Harry. Eli saw the understanding in Caleb's face, like a candle lit behind someone's eyes. Caleb did not look long. He looked back at Eli and put his hat back on his head. "You won't want law here today," Caleb said, "and you won't want Pike's men finding you helpless in your own shop with your door open. I thought I'd come tell you so you had a minute to get where you want to be, or put who you want where she won't be seen. Put who I want on her own 2 feet," Sage said, stepping out. Her voice had iron in it now, the kind that comes from someone who has already run as far as they can. "Law means different things to different men, but it means the same thing to me. It means I cannot sleep where I want." Caleb looked at her and let the weight of his gaze be what it was, respectful and tired and honest. He said, "Sage," she said. Caleb's eyes moved over her empty sleeve, then her steady stance, then the straight line of her mouth. "Then Sage," he said, "tell me the truth and I'll carry it right. That worth anything?" She blinked. Something like relief came into her shoulders, not trust, not yet. Relief that she had been offered a thing that could be weighed. "The truth is," she said, "Harlan Voss is not a man of law, but he uses law to move people like cattle. Agent Tillman listens to him. If I'm taken back, Harlan will take me. Out the back gate and laugh? Men like Pike will count that as things being set right. Caleb's jaw tightened. Voss, he said. He spat into the dirt near the door and wiped his mouth. I rolled his table once. He had marked cards. He marked my cheek with his ring. He didn't like that I didn't cry when he hit me. In town? Eli asked. He is, Caleb said. Von Pike keeps him like a dog that bites. You know Voss is a trapper. You know him as a man who smiles when he steals, Eli said. Same as Pike. Sage's eyes had gone far away again, like she was standing on a ridge and counting hoofbeats. If Voss is in town, he's not there for me yet, she said. He's there to talk. He'll come later when men are tired and the law is sleeping. He'll bring 2 men who laugh at all the wrong times. You know him, Eli said. I know him, she said, and it cost her something. He bought me once. He called it a debt. Called me a debt until I ran. She looked at Eli and her eyes were not hard and not hurt. They were just present. That's what your Pike meant when he looked in your door, that I am counted. One way, and you are counted another. Eli set his hands on the bench behind him and gripped the edge hard enough to whiten his knuckles. He had been a boy who had helped string wire across land men like Pike did not own. He did not want to be. A man who let wire be strung across people he let sleep in his bed. He met Sage's eyes. Then you're not going back, he said. I can't stop the law from walking up my road. I can stop men like Voss from walking out with you. We'll stand here and make that clear. Caleb nodded once. I got 2 men in town who don't pay Pike's brand. He paused, then added, and I got something you should see, Eli. At the mission school, Lucinda wrote me a letter last week. Wonders if you can come fix a hinge. Says there's a boy there who keeps wearing a rag of red cloth around his neck and calling for someone. Name's Sage. Says he won't speak the prayers and won't cut his hair right and wants to run like a river. The shop went so quiet that Eli could hear Rufus breathing on the other side of the door. Sage's face did not move. Only her hand on the bench tightened, and the pad of her thumb went pale. When she found words, they came soft. Hey. She said, the name landed like a bird on a sill. He is there. Caleb nodded. If you want to see him, I'll help you get there. But there's law between here and there, and law will ask questions I can't answer for you. I'll answer them, Sage said, low. Then she raised her chin and looked at Eli. But before we leave to get Soma or to Runai, want truth. You heard his name like a ghost in the night. You know the men who burned our winter camp? I saw boys with rope made of fire. Were you there? The wind outside twisted so that the sound in the eaves went strange. Eli felt the map. He had never burned Russell in his memory. He could have lied the way a man lies to keep someone in a storm. He could have said he was young, that he did not know what he was doing, that he stayed at the back, that snow made all faces the same. His mouth opened. He found that the storm of his life had twisted in such a way that if he did not set a true post now, all the fence would fall. I was there, he said. I was a scout. Put my pencil where it should never have gone. I thought I was building a life by building a map. I stood very far away and watched men like me do what they were told and not be told what that made them. I did not light a fire, but I set a road. It led to you. Sage took a small, steady breath. Thank you, she said, and her voice wasn't grateful or forgiving yet. It was simply a thank you for the weight of a truth not thrown at her. I will carry that like you will. We will carry it separate for a time. Then we will see if we carry it together. Eli nodded, felt something in him settle and something else shake. Caleb cleared his throat. You've got less than an hour before Pike brings his men, he said. If you run, you'll run into the teeth of the school. If you stay, you'll stand in the teeth of Pike. I can stand with you in town or here. I can put a word in with Lucinda for the boy, but I can't be in 2 places. Sage looked at the door of the shop, at the door they had worked until it obeyed. She looked at the wood shavings on the floor like drifted snow. We stay, she said, for this storm. Make the law look at us, not at my shadow on the road. Then when we go for Soma, we go without Voss behind us. And we stay, Eli said. His voice felt the way it used to when Mary would put her hand over his heart to feel how it beat when trouble came. "Caleb, get your 2 men, and go tell Lucinda this. Tell her that if she keeps a boy with a red cloth safe until tomorrow night, I'll fix every hinge she's got and bring her 2 bolts of good fabric besides, and tell her a woman named Sage thanks her with the whole of her life." Caleb's eyes warmed. "I'll tell her," he said. "Lock your new door, Eli." When he was gone, Eli turned the latch with the soft click he and Sage had made with. Their hands a half-hour before sounded like they'd planned it all along. It was not bullets at first, it was paper. Agent Tillman rode up with a deputy on either side and a P.W. Ket of papers in his satchel. He had a face that looked like a pale stone and had the same opinion of weather. Pike rode behind him, hat low, mouth in that almost smile. Voss was not with them. Ali guessed that meant he was in a saloon, or behind the livery, shaping lies into facts for later. Tillman dismounted and knocked, as if they were neighbors. Eli opened the door and stood, so he filled it. Sage stood a pace behind his shoulder, not hiding, not stepping forward. Rufus leaned into Eli's leg with the easy knowledge of a dog whose person was standing between a stranger and what mattered. "Double quotes, Mr. Mercer," Tillman said, voice practiced. "We have reports of a woman residing here who is enrolled to the Northern Agency and is not present at her assigned dwelling. Under federal law, we are to retrieve and return her. This is a courtesy call." "Courtesy," Eli repeated. Tillman flicked his eyes to Sage and back to Eli. He lifted the papers. "This is a list of names," he said. "Yours is not on it." "Hers is... You know her name?" Sage asked, stepping so Tillman had to look at her to avoid rudeness. "Speak it." Tillman's mouth moved around unfamiliar sounds. "He cut them short, Sage," he said finally. "If that is what you prefer, you are to return." Sage tilted her head, a small, precise motion. "Who assigned me?" she asked. "Your agent," Tillman said. "Not my mother," Sage said. "Not my father. Not my husband." She pronounced the last word with contempt. "A man who sold me does not get to own the word husband. A man who calls a coin a priest will still die in a hole calling to God and get no answer from either." Pike's voice interrupted with a careful drawl. "No use, Rylan. The law," he said. "Give the lady a coat, one of your fine quilts. Eli, he'll take her, and you'll be the kinder for it.
Oh.
I'll even forgive your trespass on my patience and not call in my note on your well." He smiled with his teeth now. "A man can be forgiving on a Sunday." "We are between Sundays," Eli said evenly. "And I sold no paper on my well." Pike's eyes slid to Tillman and back again, as if to say he could make a paper appear yet. Tillman did not bother with haggling. He put the satchel down on the porch rail, loud, like a man setting down a gun. "I am trying to do my duty without making a mess," he said, voice colder. "Ma'am, if you will come with me, I will see that you are returned to your agency. Mr. Voss will not be permitted to," he paused, choosing a word that did not exist for what Voss would do, "remove you from our care." Sage laughed. "Once, a small, bitter sound. He already has," she said. "Just don't see where he put his hands." Eli felt the heat rise in his face. He did not step forward. He did not reach for the rifle leaning against the wall just inside the door. He held the door frame like a thing he knew. "Agent Tillman," he said, "you have no warrant. You have a list. This is my home. If you step inside, I will consider you trespassing and defend my home. This woman is my guest. You can come back." With a paper signed by a judge who has read a law that says a man's home is not his when a guest seeks shelter. If the judge calls that law good, then you and I will both have to live with that. But until then, you can leave my porch. Face did not change much, but it did something small if you looked hard. He had heard the court word in Eli's mouth and seen that Eli would not cow. He had seen a woman who had not begged. He had seen Von Pike, and that alone could make a man more careful. "We'll return," he said finally. "You'll return to a new hinge on my barn," Eli said, words level. "Men, if you bring Mr. Voss, you will return to find 2 friends waiting for him, who do not count cards and who do not frighten easy." Pike laughed softly. "Your voice is big in your doorway, Eli," he said. "Let's see if it is as big under the Blue Sky Inn." "The middle of town?" Folks like to see a man who thinks he is taller than the law measured against the post. We'll see, Eli said. Tillman nodded once and turned, swung to the saddle. Pike followed, losing his smile now that there were no eyes he could buy. The deputy who had not spoken looked at Sage once and looked away fast, as if he had met her eyes and found a mirror there, and did not like what he saw. The world thinned once the horses moved down the road. Eli shut the door and leaned his forehead against it for a moment. When he turned, Sage was standing there with her hair braided tight and her chin high, but her shoulders were shaking with something that was not fear. It was relief bent into something fiercer. "Thank you," she said. And this time there was the weight of that in it. "We're not done," he said. "I know." She took a breath. "We should go while they gather their men. We can reach the mission by dusk if we cut across the bluff and down through the willow stand." "Your mare knows the river." "She does," Eli said. "You can ride?" Sage looked at him with something like gentle scorn. "I can ride," she said. "I can ride with one hand in my teeth if I must. And I can handle wood, sir." "Don't forget." The little thread of humor in her voice then was like a light through smoke. Eli went to the bedroom and took from under the bed a tin box with his mother's letters and the deed to the ranch and a piece of paper he had promised himself never to take out again. He held it a second and then left it there. He took instead a small wooden box he had made the winter after Mary died. He had carved the lid with a simple patterned 3 lines coming together and then carrying on in one. He slipped a folded paper inside with words he had not found the courage to say. He thought it foolish and then thought it right. The box on the table near the stove where Sage could find it if she looked, and he could pretend he had not meant her to. They saddled the mare in a stout bay gelding. Eli kept for his neighbor and left on a sheet of white that hid the ruts and showed everything else. They did not speak much. Ephraim had said once that silence between two people was like a blanket two could hide under it or warm yourself. This was the warm kind. Snow held the world close until it let go again. The cottonwoods along the river wore ice like beads. They reached the mission at dusk, the low house with its roof caps of frost and smoke rising soft from the chimney. Lucinda. Calloway stood on the back steps in a shawl and a frown that said there was a place in her heart that had made space for the child Sage had not yet seen. She was the kind of woman who made bread with a will and sent men to war with a broom when necessary, Mercer, she said, relief tugging her mouth despite herself. "You chose a bad hour." "I usually do," Eli said. Lucinda's eyes landed on Sage. She looked like a woman who had a few words for the world and saved them for sharp moments. "This is the one," she said, not asked. Then she softened. "I'm Lucinda. I hate half the rules I'm paid to enforce. My kitchen is warm." Sage's throat worked. "I am grateful," she said. "Soma is sleeping," Lucinda said. "He sleeps like a person who doesn't trust walls, which is proper. He runs before dawn when the frost is loudest. Stay quiet now. Here are the rules. Then do what you will." They stepped into a room that smelled like soap and potato skins and children. Eli had put hinges on the cupboard doors here 2 years back. He had not been proud to take that money, but Mary would have said that hinges did not care for politics. He had put them on straight. Lucinda poured tea and spoke fast. "Agent Tillman hasn't come here today. He will tomorrow. Voss asked yesterday if any new boys had been sent from the north. I told him no. He asked what I'd offer for one. I told him a broom handle to the back of the head. He'll return with more words. I have tonight. 2 of my girls will watch. The road. If you leave with the boy, you must do it now." Sage's hands went still in her lap. They were not delicate hands. They were clean and scarred. She looked at the kitchen door like it was a long river, and then at the hall that led to the small sleeping room. "I have something to say before I touch my brother," she said, and turned to Eli. "At gunpoint or no? At a doorway in a warm kitchen works the same. I want you to hear this where the pieces of bread were." Eli blinked. Her words came like breath pushed through cloth. He straightened, heart thrumming. Sage's voice was not above a whisper, yet the room held it like a church holds a hymn. "If you are still the man who stood with a pencil far away from my winter, then I cannot love you," she said. "If you are the man who stood in your doorway and told a government man to come back with law he could defend with his own eyes and sleep after, then I think I will. I think I do. Eli's throat closed. He saw the small wooden box he had left on his own table, the words folded there. The I was there, I am sorry. I want to be a better man for you. For myself? For all the losses that carved us? His mouth opened. He found no poetry, found true things. I am trying to be only one of those men, he said. If I have to choose between the map and you, I choose you. I'll choose you again tomorrow and the day after. Sage nodded once, as if she'd been waiting for that. It was not an easy look. It was a look that said she had a long road in her and wanted to walk it alongside someone who would not trip her on purpose. Then we will try, she said. Come. If Soma wakes and sees a man first, he will run. He will only believe my mouth. They moved down the hall. A small room held 6 narrow beds. A boy lay in the second, turned toward the WIT was not bullets at first. It was paper. Agent Tillman rode up with a deputy on either side and a P. All hair uneven from a fight with the scissors, he had lost a little and won a little. A strip of red cloth was tied around his neck. It was not fine. It was ragged. It was the most beautiful thing Eli had seen since Mary had died. Sage knelt. Her hand hovered above the boy's hair and did not touch until her breath was close to his ear. Soma, she said. He woke like a deer. His eyes were wide and black. His hand went to his neck, to the red cloth, then to the edge of the blanket. His lips moved without sound. Sage said his name again, and this time her voice broke on the O. He leaned into her, sudden hard, and his body shook with sobs that had been held a long time like a river held behind a logjam. Sage held him with her whole body. She made a sound Eli had not heard before and hoped never to again. A keening whisper of awe and pain and relief. Lucinda stood in the doorway and turned her face away, giving them privacy without leaving. Eli watched the way a man watches a thing too holy to stare at by looking just next to it. Soma's face lifted, tear-wet. He stared at Sage and said in a rush of his own language, a string of words that sounded like water over stones and laughter. Sage answered with little words like yes and no and always. It then, because men like Tillman. And Voss did not sleep long between their plans. Sage rose and took her brother's hand. Lucinda pressed a small loaf into Eli's hand. Go out the back, she said. The willow stand will hide you until the bridge. After that, I can't help you. Someone is watching there. Who? Eli asked. A man with a scar on his cheek from a ring, she said in disgust. Voss, Eli said, and the word felt like a nail. They went out into the cold. The snow had shifted again, from the south now. The willow branches caught and held it like lace. Eli led the horses to the very edge of the stand and put Soma's small foot into the stirrup while Sage steadied him. She moved with a mother's care that had learned itself in a single breath. They mounted and rode slow enough to make less noise and fast enough to make time. They reached the bridge and saw him. Voss standing in the middle like a mannequin, showing off a coat, ring shining on his finger, even in the gray light. 2 men stood behind him, one with a toothpick between his teeth, smiling like he hadn't learned the use of it. Voss's smile spread lazy across his face. Well now, he drawled. A family reunion. Cry and shame to spoil it, but I suppose some letters get delivered late. He lifted a pistol and pointed it at Sage. His eyes slid to Eli. You write maps, I write endings. Better at it. Eli held his reins in one hand and lifted the other, palm empty. You'll put that gun down and step aside, he said. There's a lady and a boy here. Voss cocked the hammer. The sound was small and enormous. Sage Eli said softly, I am sorry. It's for the map. For the winter. For right now, where my past stands on a bridge with a gun, I'd crawl under the snow and lift the world up if I could. I can't. I can only ask you to forgive me for being part of the road that led here. If I die today, I'll die wanting to be the man you thought you heard in my doorway. He did not take his eyes off Voss and the gun when he spoke. Could not have. He said it like a man offering a thing to the river without asking it to return it. Sage did not answer with words first. She shifted her weight in the saddle and put her body between Soma and Voss. Then she spoke in a voice steady enough to nail a door. I forgive you wanting, she said. The rest will build. She leaned forward then and said a thing in her language to Soma. And he nodded fast and slid off the horse's side like a fish, rolled and crawled for the willow roots. Voss's eyes flicked. He raised the gun a fraction to track the boy. Eli moved then, because that one fraction was all he had. He half fell off his horse, hit the ground hard, came up with the rifle in his hand. He did not raise it all the way. He would not have time. He did what he could. He put his body in the line of the shot. Voss fired. The sound cracked the world. Something hot and red ripped through Eli's shoulder. He staggered and fell to one knee with his rifle across his thighs. He tasted iron. Sage moved faster than Voss thought she could. She had the piece of wood she had carved in the shop a wedge she had slipped into her pocket without thinking. She threw it. It hit Voss's wrist, so the angle of his hand changed. And the second shot went high and tore a branch from the willow. The man with the toothpick swore and ducked. Rufus, who had followed them without a word and had waited under the bridge like an old soldier, sprang and locked his teeth on the other man's boot, hauling him down, toothpick and all. Caleb came, out of the brush like a man who had been there all along, and took the pistol from Voss's hand and put his own to Voss's head. I told you I'd find you with a broom handle, Lucinda said from behind, voice like thunder. Struck the second guard across the back of the knees, with the fat end of a mop she had whittled into a club. He went down like a prayer in a storm. Voss stared up at Eli, breathing hard, ring flashing, mouth gone pale. You ain't the law, he said. No, Eli said, voice thin with pain. Better. We're neighbors. Voss's eyes cut to Sage. He saw something there he hadn't seen before. He saw a woman who had stood between him and a child and had not flinched. He saw the small wedge of wood at his feet, the thing he would never understand that had turned a bullet. He saw the end of a certain kind of ownership. Agent Tillman. Arrived then with 2 deputies and an expression like a man who had been listening from the dark, and waiting to see which way the wind would blow his papers. He took in Voss on his knees, the boy under the willow, Sage with her chin up, Eli bleeding. He looked at Lucinda with her makeshift club and made a small decision. Mr. Voss, Tillman said flatly, you are under arrest for assault and for interfering with federal business. It was the business he had just decided he had been doing, which was keeping a boy safe. What business? Voss stammered. Returning a child to his closest surviving family, Tillman said smoothly. Agent's discretion. And removing you from influence? He nodded to the deputy to cuff Voss. Mr. Mercer, you require a town doctor. I require my shirt not to stick to my shoulder, Eli said, trying humor and failing halfway. He sank down to sit on the snow, leaned his head back and saw the sky as a gray ceiling with a crack of blue at the edge. He thought about the wooden box on his table like a foolish boy thinks about a kite he left in a tree when it begins to rain. Sage knelt beside him. Blood had stained his sleeve in her hands. She pressed a folded piece of cloth from her skirt against his wound. She met his eyes, and in that look was all the anger still living in her, and all the forgiveness that would have to be made, the shape of a thing that had not existed yesterday. You won't die, she said. Not here. Not yet. I'd like to wait until the wedding, Eli managed, and then grimaced. If there was one, Sage inhaled a small sound of surprise and something else, like joy wanting to be let out and married to sorrow. You ask very forward. But she did not say no. Caleb crouched, grinned sharp as a knife. I'll stand in, he said. Lucinda will say the words. It might be the only chance you have where Pike can't interrupt without getting himself cuffed too. Tillman looked like a man being swept by a river to a place where he might learn to swim. I can witness, he said stiffly. For the record, Sage's eyes filled with tears. She wiped them with the back of her hand like a child, annoyed that they would not wait. I'll marry you under the willow, she said, before you bleed out, before the story changes again. Eli laughed, and then hissed as pain scissored through him. Let's not use bleed out in the vows, he said. Lucinda set her hands on her hips, mop at her side like a staff. Hush, she said. I'll make this quick and true. The vows were simple as breath. They promised to stand when storms came, and to open the door when a stranger knocked. They promised to make would speak plain, and to forgive, not once, but daily, as work. They promised to tell the truth, even if it broke something, and to mend what broke when they could, together. They promised to love under the law, and outside it if need be, and to lift each other like a plank lifted onto a sawhorse steady. Careful, with a hand under the weight, they kissed like a man who was dizzy with blood loss and a woman who had decided to stop running, which is to say carefully and with a tenderness that did not feel fragile at all. The deputies looked at their boots. Tillman signed a paper that made sense to no one but him and folded it neatly and put it in his satchel, for it would later make him a different man than he had been. Voss cursed under his breath and then stopped when Lucinda shifted her grip on the mop. Pike arrived late, as men like him often do. He rode up with his mouth already forming the words to spoil something. He saw Eli with his arms slung, Sage with her hair undone, Soma holding her skirt, Caleb with the look of a man who has hit someone. Who deserved it? Lucinda with her weapon, Tillman with his papers. He opened his mouth and closed it again. He smiled that thin, almost smile. "You chose a bad time, Vaughn," Eli called, voice stronger than it had any right to be. "We're in the middle of something better than you." Pike looked at Voss, and then at Sage, and then at the boy. He had two choices, and he knew it. He could ride into this and make a splash that would soak him later, or he could turn and find another way water rights, a court, a rumor. "Congratulations," he said finally, and the word looked wrong in his mouth. "Mercer." He tipped his hat to Sage out of habit or calculation and rode away, planning. Eli did not die. The doctor in town was more stubborn than the bullet. He dug the lead out and swore in 3 languages and told Eli to stop trying to sit up to watch when it was his own shoulder. Sage held Eli's hand with her right hand until night fell and then held the bowl. When he was sick and then fetched water and hot bricks like she had been in a sick room before and had known how to be useful with one hand and to feet. Soma slept curled like a puppy on a pallet by the stove in the doctor's office and woke every hour to touch the red cloth at his neck and say his sister's name, as if to keep the world from rewriting itself while he slept. Lucinda sat in a chair and snoozed, mop cradled like a child. Caleb told a story about a man who'd tried to give a horse a haircut and lost a finger. Agent Tillman stood in the doorway and then stepped outside where the stars were opening like cold flowers. And he looked up and thought about how papers look small in a sky like that in the morning. Sage left for a little while and came back with the small wooden box Eli had made. She had found it where he left it, on the table by the stove. She had opened it and read the letter inside while the snow melted in a slow brown drip from the eaves of Eli's house into a bucket she had, placed with the same neatness with which she stacked wood. The letter said nothing new and everything he had not known how to say. It said, "I was there and I am sorry, and I want to be the kind of man who takes a bullet for your brother, and I want to hand you a wooden box with my heart inside it and not. Mind if you take it apart to see how it's made?" She set the box on his chest and looked at him with that look that had begun to live on her face next to fear, like 2 birds sharing a branch. "It was not too late," she said. He touched the box with his good hand. "Good," he said, voice thick. "I didn't know what to do with all those words if they hung in the room and scared Rufus." She laughed. "He'd just snore louder." She said, "Eli healed slow because there are some hurts that want to be held." He walked outside after a week and stood under a sky that had remembered itself as blue. He watched Sage fit a new hinge on the shop door with Soma holding the screws, with both hands and his tongue between his teeth in concentration. He watched Lucinda shoo Pike's man from the school gate with a broom when he arrived to ask a question he did not need answered. He watched Agent Tillman arrest a different man Pike had paid to say a different thing. He watched the river thaw. And he thought a lot about maps, where they lead, and who draws them, and whose life they carry. They married again in town, because there are some people who need to be asked to witness the making of a thing so they don't pretend it didn't happen. Some of those people cried not because they liked seeing a rancher marry a native woman, but because they liked seeing 2 people who had been lost stand in a doorway and say, "We are found." Von Pike did not come. He was busy in a back room, counting the ways he would own water in a dry year. would fight them later, on paper and with men who had never learned to square a door. There would be more reckonings. But that would be later. For now. Sage made a table for their home that fit exactly the place by the window where the morning sun came and laid its hand. Eli made a sign that hung over the gate that read Mercer and Sage, not because Sage was a thing, like a possession, but because her name made sense where his did. Soma ran by the river until his legs ached and learned the parts of a plow and the names of trees in 2 languages. He kept the red cloth around his neck until it was an idea. As much as a rag, sometimes Sage woke in the night and said a name like a prayer. Sometimes Eli woke and reached for a pencil and then set it down and reached for her hand instead. He would sometimes draw because he had been made to make marks. He drew other things, knout tables, fences, a wide sky with birds over it. Once, when summer came in a ribbon of green through the cottonwoods, Sage stood in the door and watched Eli turn wood on the lathe. She stepped in and set a hand on his back. "I forgive the boy who you were," she said quietly. "I will not forgive the man who would use him as a shield to hide behind. But I do not think you are that man." He turned and put his forehead to her shoulder. He breathed in and let it out and felt something ease in him that had been held tight a very long time. That fall, Lucinda sent word that the mission had closed for repairs needed longer than a winter could give, and in the spring. It opened with new rules on the board and a different agent, with eyes that squinted at people and not just papers. Some of that was because of what had happened under the willow. Some of it was because there are more people in the world than any trouble can count. Years would bring other storms. The land would dry up once, and Eli would have to fight Pike in a courtroom that smelled like dust and whiskey. He would bring a map that showed water running under a fence and show it to a judge who listened with his head in his chest. Sage would stand with him, and men in the rows would shift in their seats because sometimes love makes you quieter than you expect, and they would win the smallest part of a river that mattered more than a whole ocean to the cattle and to the children. There would be days when Sage would stand with other women on the porch and trade beans and babies and stories, and the news that someone's cow had calved twins. People still looked. People still whispered into their collars sometimes. Whispers. In a town or like wind in the cottonwoods, you get used to the sound or you cut the trees down. And they were not cutting. When winter came again, the wind would come from out of the north and shake the eaves and push snow against doors. Eli would hear the sound in the eaves and go to the shop and cut a wedge of wood just so and fit it into the crack where the wind got in and say to the house the same thing he had said to Sage: "You can stay if you want. There is room here." He would hold Sage as she slept, and when she woke with a name on her tongue, he would put his mouth there and take it from her and keep it safe. She would hold him when the memory of a different winter came and reminded him what boys become when men ask them to draw lines on a world that does not know how to be owned. Sometimes, when the light hit the river right, Sage would take Soma to the willow stand and lay her hand on the bark and say small things that had big weight. Soma would climb like a boy in a story and then jump into the grass and laugh. Eli would lie on his back and look up through the leaves and think of Mary and then think of Sage in the same breath and not feel the need to separate them. Because sorrow and joy had learned to sit together in him like 2 old men at a poker table with no cards left who still liked the way the other shuffled once. When a storm rolled in, with lightning like torn cloth and the smell of wet iron, a stranger knocked at the door. Eli opened it and saw a woman's face yellow with travel and a boy at her hip with hungry eyes. It could have been any year, in any door. He stepped back. "You're safe," he said, "because that is how maps are changed. Come in." "We have." Wood, the woman stepped in. She looked around and her eyes landed on the table by the window and the half-done hinge on the shop bench and the bed Eli had cleared once years back and never asked for back. She smiled, small and quick. "I can earn my keep," she said, voice weary. "I can cook or mend or split kindling." Sage came in from the kitchen with flour on her hands. She drew water and set it on the stove. "We don't charge for a roof," she said, "gentle and iron both. But if you want to work in the morning, we'll make room for the work. We can handle wood together." The woman nodded and the boy sighed, the kind of sigh that loosens something that has been tight. For too long, Rufus thumped his tail by the stove. The wind rattled the window and then eased, just a little. Eli reached for Sage's hand. He felt the scars there and the warm bones and the strength. And he looked out past the porch, past the cottonwoods, past the line where the prairie met the sky, and he felt the ache of love like a bruise he was proud of. He felt loss like a thread that ran from him to a woman long gone and to a woman at his side. He felt the hope of second chances like a good door that finally learned to close without banging. Night folded over the river. They ate and told stories, some with neat ends, some with none at all yet. They laughed the kind of laughter that comes from not being alone. Later, Eli doused the lamp and lay in the bed he had cleared once, when he had thought he would only do it for a night. He listened to the storm travel on. He listened to Sage breathe. He listened to the soft rustle of someone else sleeping under. His roof, he had once thought maps were a way to hold the world in his hands. He understood now that love was the better way to hold a person near and say, "I'll be here when the wind knocks at your door and when it passes on." He closed his eyes and saw the river running long after men like Pike stopped counting fence posts. He smiled with an ache and with joy. Under the endless western sky, love had made a road that did not need a pencil, needed only two people who would stop and stand and say, "I'll carry this with you." And then do it, one day, and then the next. Until the story of them was no longer a storm, but a sun set that warm, wide, peach-colored kind of evening that lays a hand on your neck and says, "Stay, you are home."